Hey everyone. You know that if you had traveled to Las Vegas just 1 century ago, in 1914, this is what you would have found. A village or a small town with a few hundred inhabitants and a small train station. But today, as you know, Las Vegas looks more like this. This is one of the main tourist destinations in the world, the world capital of gambling, and a name synonym of entertainment. And this is the story I'm going to tell you about today. How and why Las Vegas has become a reality. So please adopt a comfortable position, have your headsets on, because our journey to the past is beginning right now. And our story begins in 1829, when the place where Las Vegas would be built later was first named by a Spanish explorer who was trying to establish a commercial route between New Mexico and California. The name Las Vegas, which means the meadows in Spanish, was chosen because there are freshwater springs showing on the surface, and the presence of water would be key later for the installation of a permanent population. Las Vegas is in the south of the state of Nevada, but this was a time in the 1820s when Nevada, and actually all the territories from Texas to California, were not part of the US yet. They belonged to Mexico, which had taken its independence from Spain just a few years before. This very large territory, apart from Texas and the south of California, was very lightly populated, mainly by Native Americans and a few hundred Mexican families, settlers, especially in New Mexico. But in the 1830s, the frontiers started to change. First with the revolution in Texas, which declared its independence from Mexico, and a large part of the Texan population wished to join the US. And in the 1840s, 46 and 47 precisely, there was a war between the US and Mexico, ending with a US victory, and the peace treaty made Mexico recognize the independence of Texas and abandon a large territory which corresponds today to the states of California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Wyoming and Colorado as well. So, by the middle of the 19th century, Las Vegas was now in US territory, but this was just the name of a place. There was no permanent population, and the first attempt to settle on the site happened in 1855 with a small group of Mormon settlers coming from Utah who came to Las Vegas, built a little fort there with the ambition to create a small colony and to convert the local Indian tribes to the Mormon faith. But this attempt failed rather quickly. Just a couple of years later, the colony was abandoned during the Utah War. This is another story, but the Utah War, or the Mormon Rebellion, is a small-scale conflict that took place in 57-58 between some groups of Mormon settlers and the US federal government. So in 1857, the Mormons left the site, leaving a very small fort which has not disappeared today. The fort can still be seen in Las Vegas because it was taken and maintained by the US Army a few years later. Despite the failure of this first attempt to create a permanent settlement in Las Vegas, the small village started finally to take off in the second half of the 19th century as a stopover on the way between New Mexico and California. The last decades of the 19th century, especially after the American Civil War, was a time when trading, movements of people intensified quite a lot between the east and the west of the US, with the development of trade routes, of railroads, the constant arrival of new immigrants, for most of them arriving on the East Coast and then moving west, looking for new places to colonize and where to settle. And even though it remained a fairly marginal village or small town, Las Vegas benefited from this, growing slowly until the railroad arrived in Las Vegas at the beginning of the 20th century, so that by 1911 Las Vegas was finally incorporated officially as a city with a population of less than 1,000 inhabitants. The 1910s and 20s were a period of economic boom in the US, and Las Vegas continued to grow, reaching about 5,000 inhabitants by the end of the 20s. The main economic activities by the end of the 1920s were still a bit of agriculture around the city, and this role as a stopover with the trains stopping by in Las Vegas. As you know, the following decade, the 1930s, was particularly tough economically in the US with the Great Depression. After the boom of the 1920s, the appearance of a credit and stock market bubble that burst in 1929, the country entered a period of very strong recession, very high unemployment, misery, and sometimes entire mid-sized cities, the size of Las Vegas, could entirely disappear, abandoned by the population because the economic activity had entirely collapsed. But not Las Vegas, and even the opposite, because the 1930s would be really the decade during which Las Vegas took off and became a much more important city. And the pivotal year was 1931, with the beginning of the construction of the Hoover Dam. The Hoover Dam was, for the time, a massive engineering project to produce electricity and regulate the flow of the Colorado River to avoid floods and help the irrigation. And it had been designed by the end of the 1920s. The construction began 2 years after the beginning of the Great Depression, and the government invested a lot in this project in the 1930s, especially after the election of Roosevelt and a change in the economic policy in the US, with an effort put on government spending in infrastructures in particular, in order to try and stimulate the economy and get out of the recession. Almost instantly, with the inflow of male workers, the population in Las Vegas moved from 5,000 to 25,000 people. And given that these workers came without a family, the city quickly found a new economic activity, entertainment for male adults. And that included a lot of illegal activities, first with alcohol, because these were the years of the prohibition. At the national level, the prohibition ended in 1933, and gambling as well. But here, with a lot of pragmatism, we could say, the state of Nevada understood all the economic interest of legalizing gambling, and as early as 1931, gambling, which was generally illegal in every state in the US, became legal again in Nevada. Add to this the development of prostitution on a large scale, and you have all the ingredients that explain why, in this period, Las Vegas began to acquire this reputation, this scandalous reputation of a city of sin, of vice. And it is a fact that from the 1930s to the 1970s, maybe, Las Vegas would have as its main economic activity a mix of legal and illegal businesses. The boom due to the building of the Hoover Dam came to an end in 1936, when the dam was inaugurated, but Las Vegas had begun to attract other people coming from California, for example, and looking for a place where they could gamble. And there was a new impulse to its activity as a gambling city after the Second World War, with the opening of the first very large hotels and casinos. One of the first to open, and I mention it because it's the oldest hotel and casino still in operation today, was the Flamingo in 1946. And this period, after the Second World War, also corresponds to the arrival of the mafia on a very large scale in Las Vegas, and the mafia was interested in laundering money thanks to the business of casinos. Why did they come to Las Vegas? First, because the mafia, until the 1970s, had to recycle and to officialize very large amounts that they got from their illegal activities. Among these activities, the pension funds were an important contributor to income for the mafia, because the mafia had been able to control some of the trade unions that managed the pension funds, and they needed to recycle millions of dollars through official businesses. When it comes to the clearing of very large amounts, especially in cash, the business of casinos was ideal back then, because the typical process of money laundering is to declare as an income these amounts that you should not have officially, and that's very easy in a casino because the clients come with cash, and it's very difficult to check whether the declared income really corresponds to spending by the clients, or if it is a suitcase of cash that you have added yourself to the cash register. So thanks to a business like a casino, you can declare these amounts that you're not supposed to own, transform them into profits on which you pay your taxes like a good citizen, and justify your financial means and standard of living to the authorities. By the end of the 1940s, much of this money laundering was made in Cuba. That was before the Cuban Revolution, and it was particularly convenient for the American mafia to clear the money in Cuba that was outside the jurisdiction of the US, but also very close to the coast. But after the Cuban Revolution, this became impossible, and the mafia massively went to Las Vegas. In the 1950s, new hotels and casinos opened, bigger and bigger. There were names like the Sahara, the Hacienda, the Tropicana, and they contributed to turn Las Vegas in the 1960s and 70s not only in a place where money laundering and illegal activities were conducted, but also in a quite refined place. These were luxury hotels. Hollywood stars and famous singers like Frank Sinatra or Elvis Presley spent time, sometimes a lot of time, in Las Vegas, contributing to give also a glamorous aura to this city of vice. This period is well showed in the movie Casino with Robert De Niro and Sharon Stone. If you haven't seen it yet, I can only recommend it. But starting in the 1970s, Las Vegas began to change and reinvent itself. Bit by bit, the investors or owners of the hotels and casinos that were actually working for the mafia were eliminated and marginalized, replaced by more traditional investors and companies willing to invest in a cleaner business. The authorities also made a big effort to clean up Las Vegas from illegal activities and to diversify the city in a more family friendly and consensual direction. By the end of the 1980s and during the 1990s, many new resorts opened, bigger and bigger, with thousands of hotel rooms to receive a fastly growing flow of tourists coming not only from the US but also internationally, starting in the 80s. The business of slot machines, which now represents the bulk of sales in the casino industry, has grown dramatically since the 80s. Las Vegas has also diversified its offering in terms of entertainment, shows. It has become a major convention center to attract new kinds of clients and develop synergies with the rest of the business in the city. The themed resorts is something for which Las Vegas is particularly famous. They are not that recent. One of the most famous resorts of this kind is the Caesars Palace, which opened in the 1960s, but starting in the late 80s and during the 90s, there was a complete frenzy to open more themed resorts with all the themes you can imagine, like the medieval theme, the Excalibur, the Pirates, the Treasure Island, the Venetian, the Paris, Egypt with the Luxor, the New York, and many others. Some of Las Vegas hotels are so big that actually out of the 10 largest hotels in the entire world, 7 are in Las Vegas. And this is probably among the large cities in the world, the place where you can find the most hotel rooms per inhabitant. Las Vegas was badly hit by the financial and economic crisis after 2008, but it is now giving signs of recovery, and many new projects that had been frozen due to the lack of financing and sometimes abandoned are now being revived, so that at least for the next few years the good days do not seem to be over yet. Of course, even though it has become much more mainstream in the past 30 years, Las Vegas remains a controversial place for the lifestyle it encourages, because it is easy to see it as a symbol of consumerism, absurdity, the waste of resources. Also because good taste may not be why Las Vegas is famous. But if you want my opinion, I'm not saying the entire world should be like Las Vegas, but I'm happy that this place exists, however absurd it may be, however superficial. I like that there is such a unique and particular place in the world. You may find it fun or hate it, but at least I think it's an interesting experience to visit Las Vegas at least once in a lifetime. Okay, as usual, I hope you appreciated this moment, and as usual, your comments and suggestions for future videos are very welcome in the comments below. See you soon, bye bye.